Tonight, I'm going to photograph the same target with 3 cameras. Alright, I'm excited tonight. First, I am actually at a Bortle 4 sky with a background darkness of magnitude 21, which is quite good, okay? And on top of that, I have a really good forecast ahead of me tonight. It looks like a great night to be photographing. And on top of that, I'm going to be photographing the same target with 3 cameras. Now, this is a lot of gear, okay? And maybe it's overkill, I don't know. But in astrophotography, I don't think anything is ever overkill. So, let me kind of run through some of the specs of what we're running here. I've got up here, this is a brand new addition to my fleet, the EM1X. And it's running the 40 to 150 millimeter lens, which I'll be shooting at 150 millimeter focal length, and I'm going to shoot wide open at f2.8 as the fireworks go off around me. Next, I've got an EM1 Mark II. This is Old Faithful. This has been in my fleet for a while, and it's mounted to my Skywatcher ED 80 millimeter scope. This with the focal reducer that it has in the imaging train. This has an image focal length of 522 millimeters, and it's running at f6.3, okay? And then next and last, this is probably my most powerful astrophotography camera. This is my 1600mm Pro from ZWO, and I'm kind of debating tonight. I think I'm going to capture all 03 using this camera tonight, because the target that I'm going to shoot tonight, I haven't captured a lot of 03, and doing it in a darker sky is kind of a great thing to do. Alright, so the EM1X, this is a new addition to my fleet, and I'm kind of really excited about this guy. He has some interesting features about him. He doesn't have starry sky autofocus yet, but I'm pretty sure that's coming in a new firmware. And once that hits, I think I'm going to do a complete review on this camera. But one of the neat things about this camera is it has a heat tube in it that will kind of wisp away heat away from the sensor. And so while it's not an active form of cooling, it is a passive form of cooling. And on summer nights like this here, which although tonight's not super warm, the summer heat really gets to these cameras that don't have cooling. And so it should be interesting to see what the difference in heat is between the EM1X and let's say the EM1 Mark II or the Mark III, which is what we're videoing on tonight. And if you remember watching my review on the EM1 Mark III, you'll note that I noticed an almost one-stop difference in noise when we're doing exposures that were 3 minutes or longer between the EM1 Mark II and the EM1 Mark III. So we're back. It's actually almost 2 months later since I shot the beginning of this video. And usually the 4th of July and on in my area is like pretty much clear skies. The best time of year to start taking pictures and the largest number of clear nights. But this year that just has not been the case. I can kind of blame it on this guy. I just bought this. This is a little Sharp Star 61 EDPH. It's a nice fast f4.5. And the plan here is to get my wife interested in astrophotography, and I will do a series on that if I am successful. So stay tuned for that. But now let's talk about the 3 camera setup. So my imaging session with this guy, it went really good, except for one thing, and that is I did not have a dew strap for this lens. I was one short in my entire system. Now, I have since done a review on the SV Bony dew straps, and I really like them. I've bought 2 more, so now I have enough for everybody. So this won't happen to me again. But with this guy, basically I got 5 minutes of good subs, and then after that, the stars were so bad looking because of all the dew that was on the front of this guy that, yeah, the pictures were unusable. So you'll see it. It looked like it was going to be a great image. And this camera here is looking like a really sweet camera for astrophotography, even though, you know, it's a 5-year-old sensor now. But, you know, it kind of has a passive cooling system in it, and if you watch my other review comparing the EM1 Mark III versus the EM1X, you'll notice that I did find there was a significant difference in the heat generated by this guy. And that night also was kind of a warm night. I know today's going to be a warm night too. Now, the other camera, the Olympus EM1 Mark II, which I had on this guy, I got an excellent photo out of probably some of the best color I've ever gotten, you know, only stacking about 2 hours of data. And I actually kind of made a mistake. I intended to do 3-minute subs and I accidentally did 2-minute subs, which I could have probably even had a better result if I'd done 3-minute subs. Now, the other guy that I had run here, this is kind of a new setup for me. It's an achromat, but we're shooting narrowband with it, so chromatic aberrations don't really matter as much to a narrowband camera because we can focus for each and every single wavelength. And that particular night I did all 03, and I'll show you the picture here at the end of what it looks like black and white. You know, it was a nice darker sky. Typically 03 is a little bit more sensitive to light pollution and also atmospheric scene conditions. It's the ones that the hardest to capture, but you know, it's very rewarding if you get a lot of it. And then another setup that I had going, so I really had 4 cameras going this night, was my Olympus EM1 Mark III, which I had hooked up to the 45mm f1.2, and I ran it at f2.5, and that one I did have a doohickey on, of course, and I got some great results with that. I actually photographed 3 different things that night. One of them was ruined by a little bit by a lot of planes going by, and that was Scorpio's head. But then I also shot some of the center of the Milky Way, getting the North American Nebula in there, and then I also took some pictures of the Andromeda Galaxy, which is now starting to come up in the mornings. But it was really a fantastic night. I just spent a lot of time out there with my gear, looking up at the heavens. I pretty much spent the whole night up with all my gear. And if you ever do, by the way, decide to shoot with 4 cameras, okay, let me just warn you, that is a lot of setup, okay? It took me, I gave myself a good 2.5 hours to get set up, and it's a good thing that I did because it took 2 hours and 15 minutes to get all 4 cameras set up, polar aligned, focused, programmed, and running, okay? So 4 cameras, that's a lot. Just bear that in mind. If you're gonna go to a dark sky spot and you're gonna take multiple gear with you, I would say with each camera that you add to your system, you need to not increase it 100% the amount of time you have to set up. Probably increase your setup time by 125, maybe 150%. So if you're planning on setting up in half an hour like you normally do with 1 camera, figure on 1 hour and 15 minutes, all right? Because that's kind of how it worked out for me. And now it is extremely hot here, and the cicadas bugs are singing just as loud as they can in competition with me. But let's show you now some of the pictures that I got that night. It was a really fun night. It's why I love doing this, and I love getting out into the stars. So this is the first image I'm going to show tonight. It's Andromeda, and even in the widest portrait lens that Olympus has, the 45mm f1.2. This object is huge, okay, and that's because, you know, a lot of this stuff that's in space is gigantic, and I think a lot of people fail to realize that, and I hope this picture illustrates that to you, that, you know, you don't need extremely huge telescopes in order to get pictures of these objects. You can do it with just a short telephoto or even a portrait level lens. This next part here, this isn't quite exactly the center of the Milky Way, but we are looking right into the Milky Way here. And there is just so much stuff here going on. And some of this stuff is so huge, you know, it goes from corner to corner of this picture. And again, we're only using a 45mm f1.2 lens here. Now I am stopped down to f2.5, and that's just to kind of get rid of the coma that's around the edges of this lens. But still, look at some of the details here. I mean, there's smokestacks everywhere. You know, there are nebulas, there are little galaxies even in the outer edges, and there are supernova remnants. You look up the top right-hand side, we even were able to capture the Veil Nebula, and then of course we've got the North American Nebula in here, the Pelican Nebula, the Bat Nebula. There's just a whole ton of, there's probably 50 different things in this picture. It's an amazing picture, and when I was editing it and coming into the end stages of it, I was just like, wow, I can't believe how much information I captured. You know, because this is only about 45 minutes worth of data, and I would love to revisit this section of the sky with maybe a darker sky and longer exposures, because I'm only doing 60-second exposures here. I think 2-minute exposures or even 5-minute exposures would just create an enormous amount of detail and would really bring out that hydrogen, which is that red stuff that you see. Alright, so now we're on to the big mountain, the 3-camera setup that was all pointed at the same section of sky. and this is with the EM1X, which I'm very impressed with here in my initial stages of testing this camera. I think this camera is going to be great, especially when Olympus adds the starry sky autofocus. But as you know, do kind of ruin my imaging session with this camera that night. This is all I can get. You know, this is about 5 minutes of data, but still, folks, this is 5 minutes of data with a 150mm f2.8. So just amazing how much we were able to capture here. And of course, I'm using proper calibration frames, biases, flats, dark flats, darks of course, and using ASTAP to stack these images together and eliminate noise. And you know, it really came out way better than I thought it was possible for just 5 minutes of data. So really excited about the EM1X and stuff I'm going to be able to do with it in the future. Now we're going to zoom in even further, and this is right into the heart of the North American Nebula, which was kind of in the left side of the picture in the last one that we looked at. This right here, I mean, we're so zoomed in that we kind of can't even see the outside edges of it a little bit. We can kind of see the Gulf of Mexico as if it would be part of this nebula up in the upper right hand corner. That's that dark stuff. But you know, look at how much color we captured. You know, this is the EM1 Mark II, which has quite a bit more noise than the EM1X or the EM1 Mark III. And then the stars are actually kind of looking a little bit bloated in this picture, and I almost wonder if, even though I had a dew heater on this particular telescope, maybe I didn't have quite enough heat, because they look a little bloated to me. It'd be interesting to revisit this section of sky with the EM1 Mark III or the EM1X even, and see how much better result I could get with that. But still, I got a ton of color here. This is the most color I've ever been able to capture in this particular section of sky with a one-shot color camera that is not modified. Now when you look at this image compared to the last one, these are basically the same focal length, same size sensor, and the mono sensor is actually almost 10 years older than the sensor that's used in the EM1 Mark II. But because it's a mono sensor, it's just a lot more sensitive. And also, of course, it's cooled too, so that's another big factor in there. Something I kind of wish companies would add to DSLRs or mirrorless SLRs. You know, making them cooled, I think, would help with long exposure noise a lot. But here you can see, this is the picture in black and white, and I have started actually collecting some more data at home, enough to start making a color image, but it's not quite completely finished. You know, the stars in here look really kind of bad to me, but I will eventually get there, and then when I do, I'll post it up onto Instagram. Now, what I love about narrowband imaging, even though the colors are not truly real, I mean, I can get them very close to being real, but the neat thing here is that the different colors actually tell me lots of neat things about this object and its story and its history. You know, what's happening and what's moving and what's going where and what is hot, what is cold. You know, these different regions of space, you know, that are made up of different things and are doing different things. You know, it's how we kind of backtrack and see how the universe is like changed through history. So that's one of the things that's really cool about this mono image, and that's why I consider my mono images to be my best images. So hope you enjoyed all of this, and I hope you get out there and don't be afraid to use multiple cameras. Just remember, it's going to take a lot more time to set up for it.